Imagine being almost 23 and still having to sneak around like a teenager just to live your own life. That was me, stuck in a house where love felt more like surveillance. Until one day I realized the only way to grow up was to get out. I'm almost 23 and my mother still folds my underwear. I'm not talking about an occasional helpful mom thing like, oh honey, I threw your hoodie in the wash with mine, or I made dinner. If you're hungry, I'm talking about military grade. Overprotection disguised as love. The kind that feels less like nurturing and more like imprisonment. The kind that smothers you so gradually. You don't realize you stop breathing until it's way too late. To be clear, I don't hate my mom. She isn't evil, and I know she cares, maybe too much. She's the kind of woman who cried the first time I stayed home alone for 2 hours in 7th grade. The kind who labeled every plastic container in our fridge with color-coded tape, just in case. She once left work in the middle of the day to drive to my high school and hand deliver a water bottle because I looked pale when I left the house that morning. I used to find it funny, cute, even. Now I find it exhausting and invasive. And sometimes straight up humiliating, especially when your own mother confronts you in a cafe because you're on what was supposed to be your first real date. Yes, that actually happened. I'll get to it. For now, picture this. You're 22 years old, halfway through university, technically an adult, but you can't lock your bedroom door. You can't go out past 9 p.m. without a full-scale family negotiation. And if your mom sees a new contact on your phone, there's a 30% chance she'll ask who it is, a 40% chance she'll snoop, and a 100% chance she'll say something like, I'm just worried about the people you're talking to. You know how vulnerable boys like you can be. Boys like me, I'm 6'1", shave every other day, and have been legally allowed to vote for 5 years, but sure, I'm just a little boy in her eyes. Her little sweetheart who still needs his crust cut off, apparently. It's hard to explain this kind of thing to people who didn't grow up in it. Most of my friends moved out years ago. Some of them have cars, careers, relationships, full-blown adult lives. Meanwhile, I'm still living in the same bedroom with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling and adore that. Squeaks so loud it might as well be booby dash trap. Why haven't I left? I ask myself that every night. It's not like I didn't try. I applied for internships, part-time jobs, even tried tutoring online, but it's hard to build independence when your time, your choices, and sometimes your passwords aren't really yours. Last year, I finally started seeing someone, casually, at uni. She was cool, smart, funny. We clicked. We were just going to grab coffee and maybe talk about life outside of class. For once, I told my mom I was studying with a friend, which wasn't a lie. Not entirely. She happened to be walking by, a coincidence. She said, and saw us sitting together. I wish I could tell you she just waved politely and kept walking. Instead, she stormed in like I was being mugged out. What happened next felt like one of those surreal dreams where you're naked in public and everyone's watching. Except I was fully dressed and still managed to feel completely exposed. She questioned the girl. She questioned me, loudly, in front of everyone. I think I aged 10 years in 10 minutes. The girl never called me back. Can't say I blame her, and that was probably the moment I realized I couldn't do this anymore. Not just the hovering, not just the guilt, but the complete erasure of my personal boundaries. Because here's the thing, you don't wake up one day and think, wow, I'm being emotionally suffocated. It builds slowly. You justify it for years. Oh, she just cares though. She just wants the best for me. Oh, I'm lucky to have someone who looks out for me. And then one day, you're sitting alone at home while your friends are out, living real lives, and you realize you're not just being looked out for, you're being controlled. Still, I didn't blow up. I didn't run away. I didn't even yell that day in the cafe. I just sat there, numb, while my mom did what she always does, filled every silence with worry, every boundary with love, every inch of space with her presence. I wanted to scream. Instead, I went home and cleaned my room because I knew she'd do it for me if I didn't, and I couldn't bear her touching my things again. There's something about being treated like a child that makes you feel less like a person. So, here I am, a legal adult who has never gone on a vacation without his parents, who has never had a girlfriend past the talking stage, who has never once woken up in a space that felt entirely his own. And yes, I'm trying to change that. It's not easy. No steady income, no guarantee of support, no real emotional roadmap for what separation looks like when your family still sees you as a 10-year-old in size 3 sneakers, but I've got a bag packed, mentally, if not physically, and I'm ready, even if she isn't. My mom isn't a bad person. That's the part that makes all this harder to untangle. She's not cruel or violent or careless, quite the opposite, really. She's attentive, involved, meticulously invested in every corner of my life. But there's a line between love and control, and she crosses it constantly, sometimes with a smile, sometimes with tears, but always in a way that makes me feel like my life doesn't fully belong to me. She sees herself as the captain of a ship, the ship being my existence. I've never really been at the wheel. She's navigated every storm, patched every leak, and made sure I never got close to the edge. Which sounds great in theory, until you realize she never actually let you learn how to steer. Growing up, I didn't think much of it. She was always there, making lunch, checking my backpack, emailing my teachers, organizing my drawers. I never had to ask for anything because it was already done by the time I thought of it at first. That felt like love, and it was, in its way, but it also made me soft, uncertain. I never had the freedom to fail, which meant I also never had the freedom to grow up by the time I hit 18. Most of my friends were figuring things out, jobs, university applications, their own bank accounts. Meanwhile, I still had to ask if I could go to the corner store. It's like my life had a permanent filter on it, one of constant supervision. A second heartbeat I didn't ask for, breathing just over my shoulder. When I got to university, I hoped that would change. I imagined moving out, sharing a flat, staying up late, eating badly, the whole messy, imperfect, normal student experience. But I didn't leave, for a lot of reasons. Money, logistics, a kind of psychological inertia that I now understand as fear, and she was relieved, overjoyed. Actually, she treated my decision to stay home as proof that I still needed her, that she was right to worry all along. She never said those words. She didn't have to. She showed it in 1,000 little ways, like waking me up every single morning. Even on weekends, even when I begged her not to, her voice became my alarm clock. She'd knock once, and then come in anyway. I'd find her, standing by the bed with a folded towel, or a plate of toast, or a reminder about something I hadn't forgotten, or like how she'd go into my room when I wasn't home just to tidy up, which meant she moved things, reorganized my shelves, took empty bottles to the trash. Sometimes she'd rearrange the pens on my desk or unplug my laptop charger. Because it's not safe to leave things plugged in, there were times I'd come home and just stand there, staring at my own space, trying to figure out what was missing or out of place. It was subtle, but it chipped away at me. Bit by bit, every item she shifted reminded me that the room wasn't really mine. It was her idea of mine. There was one week when I intentionally left my laundry in a basket, not because I was lazy, but because I wanted to handle it myself. On my time, I had planned to do it Sunday morning. By Saturday afternoon, it was already folded and stacked by my bed. I never asked her to. I had even told her not to. But she couldn't stop herself. She told me I'd forget, that it was easier for her, that she didn't mind, that she was just trying to help. That word, help, started to feel like a cage. Because it wasn't about help, it was about control disguised as kindness. It was about keeping me dependent in a way that looked like care from the outside, but suffocated me from the inside. I couldn't even cook in peace. The kitchen was her domain. If I tried to make something, pasta, eggs, anything, she'd hover. She'd grab the pan from me, or turn down the heat, or start washing dishes. Before I was even done, it always ended the same way. Me sitting at the table, silently eating something she finished cooking, while she wiped down the counters and talked about nothing in particular. I stopped trying after a while, not because I didn't want to cook, but because I hated feeling like a guest in my own house. Even the most basic tasks became rehearsals for guilt. I got used to shrinking my needs, to quietly adjusting my routine so I wouldn't trigger her help. I'd do laundry late at night. I'd study at the library so she couldn't ask questions. I'd eat in my room so she wouldn't hover in the kitchen. These weren't decisions born of laziness or disrespect. They were small acts of resistance in a life that wasn't fully mine. But the worst part, the truly exhausting part, was how it all came wrapped in affection. She didn't scream or insult. She made tea. She folded shirts. She called me my little treasure and kissed my forehead when I left the room. And when I told her, gently, nervously, that I needed more space, she didn't get angry. She got sad. She said she was being punished for loving me. She said I was pushing her away. She cried. She made me feel like the villain in a story I never asked to be part of, and it worked. I'd always backpedal, apologize, let her into the room, let her take the laundry, let her believe that everything was fine, until it wasn't, until I started to feel like I was suffocating in my own home. It wasn't just about chores or laundry. It was the constant sense that nothing belonged to me, not even my time, not even my choices. My life had become a museum curated by someone else, and I was just the exhibit inside it. Sometimes I'd lie in bed at night and imagine what it would feel like to live alone, to cook what I want, when I want, to leave my laundry in the basket and have no one touch it, to come home and know, with certainty, that nothing had moved while I was gone. It's a fantasy most people take for granted. For me, it was a distant dream because even thinking about independence felt like betrayal, like I was plotting an escape from someone who only wanted to love me. But love shouldn't feel like captivity, and no matter how much she denies it, her version of love came with strings attached. Strings that wrapped around my choices, my privacy, my peace, strings that felt more like chains. It took me a long time to admit that, even to myself. But that realization was the beginning of something, a shift, a crack in the narrative I'd been fed my whole life. The story where I was the precious child and she was the protector. Because I wasn't a child anymore. I just wasn't allowed to act like it. Privacy is one of those things you don't fully appreciate until it's gone. Or maybe you don't realize it's gone until someone points it out, except in my case. No one pointed it out. It just slowly evaporated until I was living in a state of permanent exposure. Nothing was truly mine, not my space, not my time, not even my phone. My room has always been my only sanctuary, and even that is a fragile illusion. It's not locked because the door doesn't have a proper lock. My parents never installed one. For safety reasons, they wanted to be able to get in at all times. As a kid, I accepted that. As an adult, it feels invasive, like I'm a tenant in someone else's house with no right to boundaries. There are days when I come home and can tell, within 3 seconds, that she's been in there. A pair of socks moved, a pile of books rearranged, dust wiped from the windowsill in a way I didn't ask for. None of these things are crimes. But the effect is the same. My personal bubble is popped. I can't leave my things as I want them. Because her version of tidy overrules mine, she thinks she's helping. I just feel like my autonomy is being chipped away, one folded t-shirt at a time. I tried asking her to stop. I asked nicely. I asked firmly. The outcome was always the same. Hurt feelings, followed by excuses. She'd say she just wants me to have a clean space. She'd say I wouldn't understand how much mess builds up if she left it alone. She'd say she doesn't mind doing it. So why should I mind? Because it's mine. That's why. Or at least, I want it to be mine. But every time she touches something, I feel like I'm 10 years old again, incapable of taking care of my own life. The same thing started happening with my phone. I didn't even know it at first, which is what makes it worse. I'd always been casual about leaving my phone around. I never thought my own mother would go through it. I'm not sure when it started, but I found out by accident. I was on her laptop one day, helping her with some email issue, and I noticed that she had a browser tab open with a conversation I had on social media. A conversation she shouldn't have had access to. It hit me like a punch to the stomach. My private messages, read by someone who should trust me, not monitor me. I didn't confront her right away because I didn't even know how to process it. I felt exposed, angry, confused. When I finally brought it up, her response was predictable. She claimed it was just curiosity, or that she was worried about the people I talked to online. As if I'm some naive child being tricked by strangers. The irony is, I'm cautious online. I don't post much. I don't share personal details with people I don't know. Yet somehow, the person invading my privacy isn't a random hacker. It's my own mom. Since then, I've been paranoid. I changed my passwords. I keep my phone with me at all times, but the damage is already done. Every time I type a message, I feel a flicker of unease, like someone is reading over my shoulder, even when I'm alone. I hate that feeling. I hate what it's done to my trust. The invasion doesn't stop with my room or my phone. It's woven into everything. She wants to know where I am at all times. If I'm out past 9 p.m., I get texts, not 1 or 2, but 5 or 6, asking when I'm coming home, who I'm with, what I'm doing. I've stopped sharing details because any information I give just leads to more questions. I keep things vague now, which only makes her more suspicious. It's a cycle that feeds itself, and when I do stay home, which is most nights, I'm expected to be present, visible. If I spend too much time in my room, she'll knock and ask if something's wrong. If I go for a walk at night, she worries I'll get attacked or lost. I'm almost 23, but the level of freedom I have would make sense for a 12-year-old, maybe 13 if they're responsible. What gets me the most is how normalized it's become. For years, I just accepted this as my reality. I didn't question it, because every time I tried, I was made to feel like I was ungrateful, like I was the problem for wanting independence. And when you hear that enough times, you start to believe it. You start to think maybe you are wrong for wanting space. The cafe incident, the one with the girl, was just an extension of this pattern. My mom doesn't respect boundaries because she doesn't believe they should exist. Between family members, to her, we are one unit, one organism. The idea that I can have a private life separate from her is, in her mind, a betrayal. But it's not betrayal. It's just growing up. The war on privacy isn't just about physical spaces or personal devices. It's about identity. It's about the right to have parts of myself that no one else gets to control or inspect. And when that's constantly violated, you start to lose sight of who you are outside of the shadow of the person monitoring you. Some nights, I sit in my room with the lights off, just listening to the silence. It's the only time I feel truly alone. Not lonely, just alone, in a good way, unobserved, untouched. But even then, I know that the illusion can break in any second. A knock on the door, a voice calling my name, a question about what I'm doing, even though it's obvious I'm doing nothing. This isn't how adulthood is supposed to feel. And the worst part, I don't think she even realizes what she's doing. In her mind, she's just being caring. She thinks the world is dangerous, that I'm still vulnerable, that I need her to shield me from everything. But the more she tries to shield me, the less capable I feel. The less I believe I can survive on my own. I've started to resent my own dependence. I feel weak, like I'm behind in life. Most people my age are figuring out rent, bills, relationships. I'm still figuring out how to get an hour of uninterrupted privacy. Sometimes I think about leaving in the middle of the night, just packing it back, grabbing my essentials, and disappearing. But then I remember, I don't even have enough savings to cover a month's rent. I don't have a stable job. And part of me still feels guilty for even imagining a life where she's not involved. In every step I take, the war on privacy isn't just external, it's internal. It's the constant battle between the part of me that wants to break free and the part of me That feels to tied down by fear, by guilt, by habit. But I know I can't live like this forever. I'm reaching the point where I'd rather struggle on my own than continue to suffocate in a house where I can't even call my own room mine. Up until that day, I still believed I could find pockets of normalcy. Even with everything, the constant hovering, the guilt trips, the surveillance, I thought maybe I could still carve out some private moments for myself. A little freedom, hidden in the margins. That illusion shattered in the space of about 7 minutes in a quiet corner of a cafe. I had met her a few weeks earlier. The girl, we were in the same seminar group at university. She was sharp, thoughtful, had this calm confidence I admired. Nothing came of it at first. Just casual small talk before lectures. The occasional shared eye roll when someone in the front row tried hard to impress the professor. But slowly, a rhythm formed, a shared walk to the station, a few messages exchanged. Then one day, she suggested grabbing coffee. I said yes immediately. It was the first time in a long while that someone had shown interest in me that wasn't connected to family or obligation. I was nervous but hopeful. I didn't call it a date, not officially, but to me, it felt like one. The idea of being seen, not as someone's son or student, but just as myself, was exhilarating. I didn't tell my mom. I told her I'd be on campus late to study. It wasn't a lie, just not the whole truth. I didn't want to start another interrogation. Who was I meeting? Why didn't I mention it earlier? Did I even know what kind of people she came from? These conversations always ended the same way, with her clinging to the idea that anything unfamiliar was inherently unsafe. The cafe was a small, cozy place near the university. We found a table by the window. It was a gray afternoon, the kind where everything feels slightly blurred at the edges, like the world's been dipped in soft focus. I remember being surprised at how natural it felt. We talked about books, music, travel. She asked questions. She listened. I laughed, not the kind of polite, guarded laugh I usually give at home, but something real. Something full dash body dot. It was the first time in a while that I felt present in my own life. I didn't even notice her at first. My mother, she must have been walking by on the sidewalk outside. I don't know if it was a coincidence or if she had somehow figured out where I was, honestly. I still don't know, but the next thing I remember is her face in the window. Then the door swinging open. The shift in the atmosphere was immediate. Her presence was like a cold front sweeping into the warm interior of the cafe. I felt it before I even saw her fully, that tightening in my chest, the sudden self-consciousness. I knew what was coming before she even said a word. She walked straight up to the table. There was no hesitation, no sense of boundaries. She looked at the girl, then at me, then back at the girl again. Her expression said everything. Confusion, suspicion, hurt. I tried to stay composed, to signal with my body language that this wasn't the time or place. But it didn't matter. She launched into a barrage of questions, not shouted, but loud enough that heads turned. She wanted to know who the girl was, why I hadn't mentioned her, why I was being secretive. She phrased it all like concern, but it came out accusatory, dramatic, inappropriate. The girl was polite. She tried to diffuse the situation with a soft smile, a few calm words. I don't think that made it better. If anything, it made my mother more emotional, like she wasn't just losing control of the situation, but losing control of me. I sat there, mortified. I wanted to sink into the floor. I couldn't look at anyone. The barista was pretending not to notice. Other customers were staring with a mix of curiosity and pity. The girl glanced at me once, searching for something in my face, an explanation, maybe, or an apology, but I was frozen. I couldn't give her anything. Eventually, the girl stood up, said she had to go. She left before I could say anything meaningful. I watched her walk out into the drizzle, disappear around the corner. And with her went the last shred of dignity I had in that moment. My mom didn't leave immediately. She lingered, fussing, trying to justify what had just happened, she said. She was just worried. She said she didn't mean to embarrass me. She said I should have been more open, more responsible. But the truth is, that day broke something in me. It wasn't just the humiliation. It was the realization that even the smallest attempt at independence could be invaded, dismantled, exposed. That I couldn't even sit across from someone in a public space without the weight of my mother's oversight crashing down around me. The aftermath was quiet. At home, I said almost nothing. She acted like nothing serious had happened. She made dinner. She asked about my day. She mentioned something about the laundry, as if the whole thing had been a harmless misunderstanding, a moment of concern blown out of proportion. I checked my phone that night. No message from the girl, no response to mine, just silence. I waited a week, then two. I stopped trying. I got the message. Something about that day shifted how I looked at everything. It was no longer just about discomfort or awkwardness. It was about loss. I lost a chance, a connection, a maybe. I lost the possibility of something normal, something my peers experience all the time without even thinking about it. More than that, I lost faith in my ability to live a full life. While still under her roof, I started to withdraw after that. Not dramatically, but enough to notice. I stopped talking about school. I avoided eating dinner with the family. I stayed out later, not to socialize, but to find small moments of solitude, walking aimlessly, sitting in the park, staying on campus long after classes were over, but every retreat was met with resistance, more questions, more emotional pull. She'd act hurt, say she missed me, ask if she'd done something wrong. It always put the responsibility back on me, like it was my job to make her feel better about boundaries she refused to respect. That cafe scene plays in my head more often than I care to admit, not because of the embarrassment, but because it was so painfully revealing. It wasn't about the girl, or the coffee, or even the supposed secrecy. It was about her inability to see me as a separate person. That was the moment I understood something crucial. She doesn't want me to grow up, not really. She wants the version of me that fits neatly into her world, predictable, dependent, available. The moment I step outside that box, it's a threat, not just to her control, but to her identity. Because what is she, if not the protector, if not the caretaker? She built her entire life around looking after me, and now that I'm old enough to look after myself, she doesn't know where that leaves her, and that's tragic for her. But it's not my responsibility to keep living in a way that keeps her comfortable. I don't want to live my life walking on eggshells to protect someone else's illusions. That day in the cafe wasn't the beginning. It wasn't even the worst thing that happened. But it was the turning point, the moment when I stopped believing that I could find freedom. By making small compromises, the reality is simpler. I either leave, or I don't grow. After the cafe incident, I started noticing just how small my world had become. Not physically, we live in a decently sized house in a quiet neighborhood. Nothing cramped or confining on the surface, but emotionally, socially, mentally. It felt like every door around me had a lock on it. Some were subtle, some were old and rusted. Some I had put there myself, without even realizing it, but the result was the same. I was stuck. Growing up, I never really had friends over. At first it was because I was shy. Then it became clear that it wasn't just me, it was the house. The atmosphere, the way my mom hovered anytime someone came by. She'd offer snacks, sure, but she'd also ask too many questions, make the conversations awkward, and linger in the hallway pretending to clean just so she could overhear things. People noticed. They stopped coming around out at school. I was just social enough to blend in. I wasn't the outcast, but I wasn't anyone's first call on a Saturday night either. And honestly, I got used to it. I learned to enjoy being alone. Or at least, I convinced myself that I did. There's a kind of numbness that sets in when your world is so tightly controlled. You stop reaching out because rejection starts to feel inevitable. You tell yourself it's safer to be alone than to be judged, or worse, exposed. As I got older, the isolation hardened into routine. I had acquaintances, classmates, a few people I messaged from time to time, but nothing deep. I couldn't let it get deep because I couldn't bring anyone into my world. Not really. Not the world where I had to be home by 9, where I couldn't explain why I never hosted, why I avoided sleepovers, why I always had to check with someone about plans that most adults just make on their own. It's hard to build meaningful friendships when your life is an invisible cage you're too embarrassed to describe. So I stayed quiet. I said no a lot. I made excuses. Over time, people stopped asking. And when it came to dating, forget it. It wasn't just that I lacked experience. It was that I lacked the infrastructure for intimacy. I had no privacy, no freedom to explore that side of myself. Any attempt at connection felt like a risk, a potential scandal. After the cafe disaster, the message was clear. Emotional closeness was only allowed on her terms. The worst part is how easy it is to internalize that. You start to believe you don't deserve connection. You start to view yourself as broken, or unready, or fundamentally uninteresting. You compare yourself to people your age who've had relationships, breakups, whole chapters of life you've barely touched, and it makes you feel smaller, like you've been left behind. There was a time I tried pushing back just a little. I asked if I could have a friend over for a study session. She hesitated, then said yes, but hovered the entire time. I could feel her presence just outside the room, waiting for something to go wrong. The energy was so awkward, I ended the session early and never tried again. Eventually, I stopped asking. It wasn't worth the performance, not the fake smiles, not the whispered judgments afterward, not the constant suspicion that someone else might take me away from her orbit. She says she wants me to be happy. But happiness, the kind I want, requires freedom, and freedom, in her eyes, looks too much like danger. Family vacations were the most surreal part of it all. At an age when most people are planning weekend trips with their partners or friends, I was still expected to go away with my parents. Not just expected, required. There was no room for negotiation. If I brought up schoolwork or job interviews, I was told they were secondary. That family comes first. I remember sitting on a beach once, surrounded by happy couples and groups of friends my age, while I shared a hotel room with my parents and was told not to wander off alone. I couldn't even get a drink without a minute lecture about safety. It was like being 16 all over again, only I wasn't. I was 22. I wasn't allowed to grow into my own person. Every attempt to stretch out was met with a firm but smiling hand pushing me back into place. It didn't always feel like force. Sometimes it felt like love. That's what made it so confusing. Because when love is used to justify control, it becomes a weapon wrapped in velvet. The house itself became a symbol of that contradiction. It's clean, comfortable, filled with memories, and yet it feels more like a museum than a home. I walk through it quietly, careful not to disturb the order. I spend most of my time in my room, not because I want to, but because it's the only place that feels remotely mine, and even that is tenuous, conditional. When friends ask why I still live at home, I give them practical answers. Rent is too high. The job market is tough. I'm saving money. All of those are true, but none of them are the full truth. The real answer is harder to say, because the real answer sounds like failure. It sounds like fear. It sounds like a groan. Man admitting that he doesn't know how to leave. But it's more complicated than that. It's about emotional dependency. Not mine, hers, and by extension, mine too. Because when someone builds their entire sense of purpose around taking care of you, you start to wonder what will happen if you stop needing them. You start to wonder if they'll fall apart, or if you will. Every door in this house is open, technically, but emotionally, they're locked. Locked with expectation, with guilt, with years of routine that have been shaped to keep me small, compliant. Safe. It's easy to blame myself, to say I should have left earlier, fought harder, been braver, but it's not that simple. You don't just walk out of a system you've lived in your whole life. You have to unlearn everything. You have to dismantle the version of love that told you boundaries were betrayal, and that takes time. I still think about that girl sometimes, the one from the cafe. I wonder what she must have thought. I wonder if she told. There's a strange kind of tension in being somewhere beautiful and feeling like you're trapped. That's what family vacations have always been for me. Scenic prisons. I know how that sounds. Ungrateful, dramatic, but try imagining this. You're on a Mediterranean beach, blue water stretching out to the horizon. The sun warm in your face, strangers laughing and sipping cocktails around you. And your mother is applying sunscreen to your neck because you always miss that spot. You're almost 23. Your shirt is still damp from being yanked out of your hands because she didn't want you to catch. Hey, chill. And you can't leave the area for more than 15 minutes without reporting where you're going and when you'll be back. That's not a vacation. That's supervised recreation. Most people look forward to getting away. For me, vacations were just my normal life, condensed into a tighter, more claustrophobic form with fewer hiding places. At home, I could at least close my bedroom door, claim a study session, walk to the park and breathe for a few minutes. On vacation, there was no escape. Just the three of us, me, my mom, my dad, moving in a tight formation like some bizarre family unit from a sitcom stuck in endless reruns. Every trip followed the same formula. She planned the itinerary down to the hour. Breakfast at 8 o'clock, sightseeing from 9:30 to 2 o'clock. Lunch at a pre-selected safe restaurant. No unfamiliar food, no street snacks, some block rate applied hourly. Bottled water only. Back to the hotel by 5 o'clock. Dinner by 7 o'clock. No late night walks, no solo adventures. If I wanted to read on the balcony, she'd sit next to me. If I wanted to take a photo alone, she'd offer to stand next to me in case someone tried to snatch my phone. I didn't get drunk. I didn't flirt with strangers. I didn't get lost in a foreign city and find myself. I didn't do any of the things people my age are supposed to do on vacations. I was busy getting sunscreen rubbed onto my ears while watching couples my age kiss in the surf. What made it worse was how normal she made it sound. She'd always describe our vacations to others like we were the perfect family, close, healthy, safe, and from the outside, I suppose we were. But there's nothing safe about being infantilized in front of other adults. Nothing safe about being watched constantly, treated like a teenager in need of constant monitoring. 1 year. We went to a coastal town in Croatia. Beautiful place, old stone buildings, turquoise water. The kind of place that makes you wonder if life could be simpler somewhere else. On the third night, I told them I wanted to go for a walk after dinner, just down to the beach. Maybe grab a drink at the bar by the marina. Something small, something private, something mine. She looked at me like I just asked to go cliff diving without a parachute. I could see it in her eyes, the panic dressed as concern. I knew exactly what would come next, the subtle guilt, the hesitation, the sigh. And then the reminders about the area being unfamiliar, the dangers of being alone at night, how we don't know these people. I ended up not going. I sat in the hotel room, scrolling aimlessly through my phone, pretending I didn't care. That night, I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling fan spinning above me. I couldn't sleep, not because of the noise or the heat, but because of the voice in my head that kept asking the same question. What are you still doing here? I didn't have an answer. Every time I thought about leaving, not just the vacation, but the whole life I was stuck in, I'd run into the same wall. Money, stability, the lack of a plan, and the guilt, always the guilt. Because no matter how much I resented the control, I still cared about her. I still didn't want to hurt her. I still felt responsible for her feelings, as if my independence would shatter her. But that night in Croatia, something cracked. Not dramatically. There were no big declarations or emotional breakdowns, just a quiet shift. A realization that I couldn't keep waiting for permission to grow up. I started watching the other people on vacation, the couples my age holding hands, exploring the streets without anyone checking their location. The backpackers, sunburned, broke, but glowing with some kind of light I didn't recognize in myself. Even the families with younger kids seemed more relaxed than mine. I wasn't jealous. I was haunted. Haunted by the version of me that might have existed in another timeline, one where I learned to navigate the world without someone shielding my every step. One where I made mistakes and grew from them instead of being bubble wrapped into stagnation. On the last day of that trip, I remember walking to the edge of the rocks by the water. I sat down alone for a few minutes while they were packing up the bags. The waves were quiet, the sky just beginning to darken. I remember thinking, this is what peace feels like. Not the silence itself, but the absence of her voice, her presence, her constant watchfulness. And then, like always, I heard her calling my name. It was time to go. Time to go back to the house where I wasn't allowed to lock my door. Time to go back to the life I hadn't chosen. Time to go back to pretending that this was all normal. There's something soul-crushing about returning from vacation more exhausted than you were before. Like the trip was just a physical relocation of the same emotional cage, different scenery, same rules. After that summer, I stopped pretending. I started researching apartments. I looked into jobs, even the ones that didn't pay much. I knew I wasn't ready yet, not financially, but the desire to leave had finally become something sharper than the vague wish. It had become a goal because I knew, deep down, that if I didn't leave, I'd never become a real person. Not in that house. Not under her roof. Not while sunscreen and curfews and checking texts define my reality. I had to get out, even if I failed, even if it hurt, even if it meant disappointing the only person who had ever really tried to take care of me. Because that was the price of becoming myself. Everyone is one, a breaking point. Some people scream when they hit it. Some cry. Some throw things. I didn't do any of that. I didn't even raise my voice. But inside, something split, clean and quiet, like ice cracking under pressure. It didn't happen all at once. That's the thing people don't understand about emotional erosion. You don't wake up one day and suddenly explode. You weather it, day after day, until one tiny, stupid thing becomes the final weight on the pile. A comment, a glance, a sigh at the wrong time. But before that, there were weeks, months even, of slow unraveling. After that summer trip, I came back different, still obedient, still cautious, still inside the house, but less willing to play along. I stopped pretending everything was fine. I pulled back even more. My silences grew longer. My eyes didn't light up when she asked about my day. I didn't argue, but I didn't explain myself either. I just withdrew. It didn't go unnoticed. She became more emotional, more reactive, more determined to check in, to ask questions, to reassert herself in every corner of my life. If I took a walk, I came home to multiple missed calls. If I stayed in my room too long, she knocked every hour. She made more food than usual, told me I looked tired even when I wasn't, acted as though I was on the verge of collapse. It wasn't about concern. It was about control in the language of care, and I was crumbling, slowly, but surely. I started waking up exhausted. I'd lie in bed and dread even leaving the room. My stomach was in knots all the time. I couldn't focus on studying, couldn't enjoy the rare moments of calm. I started fantasizing about escape, not just moving out, but disappearing entirely, becoming someone else, somewhere else. That's when I finally started therapy. I didn't tell anyone. I found a university service that offered private sessions to students, and I booked an appointment under the guise of staying late on campus. I was nervous going in. I thought maybe I'd over-dramatize things, that I'd sound spoiled or immature, but the therapist didn't make me feel that way. She just listened, patiently, without interrupting, without minimizing anything. And I remember, in the first session, saying something I hadn't even fully realized until the words left my mouth. I don't feel like a person in my own house. That sentence echoed for days. In the weeks that followed, I began to think differently. Not bigger, just clearer. For the first time, I started to see patterns. I saw how every kind gesture had strings attached, how every worry was a form of surveillance, how my mom's emotional reactions weren't just love, but also defense, a desperate attempt to keep the world from changing. And I began to test small acts of rebellion. I refused to answer text right away. I said no to things I usually would have accepted out of habit. I skipped dinner once, just to see what would happen. The fallout was intense. She became withdrawn, passive-aggressive, then openly upset, said she didn't know what was happening to me, said I was becoming cold. She started making comments about losing me, about other people getting in my head. That's when I knew she could feel it too. The shift, the unraveling of the dynamic we'd both depended on for so long, and it terrified her. Meanwhile, I had started picking up small freelance gigs online. Nothing consistent, just tutoring, editing, little odd jobs that paid a few bucks here and there. But every hour I spent working for someone else was an hour I reclaimed, a piece of myself I owned. I kept it quiet. I didn't want to explain it. I didn't want it questioned. It was mine. And then, one afternoon, it all came to a head. I had just finished a call with a tutoring client, a high school student who's to say I'd been helping edit. It was late afternoon. The house was quiet, and for a brief moment, I felt okay, grounded, capable. Like maybe things were starting to shift in my favor. Then she walked into my room without knocking. She saw the open laptop, the notes, the headset. She started asking questions. What was I doing? Who was I talking to? Was I being safe online? Had I told anyone my full name? I didn't answer. I couldn't. I just sat there, frozen in place. While her voice grew louder, not angry, but wounded, she said she felt betrayed. That I was hiding things, that I was keeping secrets in her own house. She looked around the room like it was unfamiliar to her, like she couldn't believe I'd built something without her. And then she started crying. Not loud, messy sobs. Just silent tears. She stood there in the doorway, shaking her head as if I'd committed some deep, unspeakable betrayal. And I realized this wasn't about me working online. This wasn't about safety or secrecy or laptops. This was about control, about the fact that, for the first time, she wasn't the gatekeeper of everything in my life. I wanted to comfort her. I wanted to tell her it wasn't personal, that I still loved her, that I just needed space. But I didn't say any of that because deep down, I knew that anything I said would just be another rope tying me to the floor. More guilt, more negotiations, more emotional ransom. So I said nothing. I just stood up, packed my laptop, and left the room. I walked around the neighborhood for over an hour. I didn't go anywhere in particular. I just walked until the tightness in my chest turned into a dull ache. That night, we didn't speak. The next morning, she left breakfast outside my door. The unspoken message was clear: reset, rewind, pretend. It didn't happen, but I couldn't pretend anymore. That was the breaking point, quiet and anticlimactic, but final. Something had snapped, and I wasn't going back. That weekend, I started applying for flat shares. I contacted a friend from class who had recently moved out and asked how he managed. I started collecting my freelance income into a separate account. I deleted all my old browser histories, changed all my passwords, locked down my phone like a teenager trying to sneak out, because in some ways, that's what I was, a teenager trying to escape. Except I wasn't a teenager anymore. I was an adult who had never been allowed to grow up. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. I didn't have much saved. I didn't have a job with benefits. I didn't even know how to grocery shop properly. But none of that mattered anymore, because staying would have cost me more than money. It would have cost me myself. Making the decision to leave was the easy part. It came like a clear thought at the end of a long fog. There was no drama in it, no yelling, no door slamming or declarations, just a steady, unwavering sense of, I have to get out of here. Actually, doing it, that was another story entirely. I began treating my departure like a secret operation. Quiet, methodical, invisible. I opened a new bank account using the university branch's address and started moving what little money I made from freelance work into it. I browsed rental listings late at night with the brightness turned all the way down. I deleted messages. I cleared history. I started watching YouTube videos about budgeting and cooking and what to look for in a rental agreement. It felt ridiculous, a 22-year-old planning a breakout like a teenager trying to run away. But the stakes felt that high. This wasn't just about leaving home. It was about escaping a psychological construct that had defined my entire life. It was about finally choosing myself. I'm on a flat share about 40 minutes from my university. Nothing fancy. One small room, a shared kitchen, a few student roommates who didn't seem like serial killers, which, at this point, felt like a win. The rent was just barely within range if I pushed my freelancing hard enough. I scheduled a viewing under the pretense of attending a group study session that afternoon. As I walked through the bare hallway of the building, I imagined what it would be like to walk through that door at the end of a long day and not feel the need to report to anyone, to leave dishes in the sink, to listen to music out loud, to fall asleep without the sound of footsteps pacing outside my room. It felt impossible and totally real at the same time. The roommates were polite, detached, exactly the kind of people who weren't interested in controlling anyone's life. I liked that. I left that viewing with a strange combination of panic and euphoria bubbling in my chest. I wanted it. I was terrified of it, but mostly, I was ready for it. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't tell my dad. I didn't tell my friends. I definitely didn't tell her. But I started packing, quietly, one drawer at a time. Things I wouldn't miss right away. Notebooks, old hoodies, chargers, books. I stashed them in bags and boxes under my bed, behind other boxes. I don't know why I felt the need to hide it. Maybe because it didn't feel real until I was holding it all in my hands. Then the job offer came, part-time work for a language tutoring startup. Not perfect, not permanent, but enough to move, enough to live. I remember staring at the email in disbelief. I had checked it 5 times before accepting. I didn't smile. I didn't cheer. I just sat there, staring, feeling the ground shift beneath me. This was it, my way out. I chose the following Friday. I told her I had a long day at school. I planned to bring a duffel bag to campus and just not come home. I had arranged to transfer my things over the weekend. My flatmates agreed to cover for me. I even planned the bus routes. Everything felt controlled, clean. But leaving wasn't going to be clean. Not in this house. Not in this family. I don't know how she found out. Maybe I left something open on my laptop. Maybe she noticed the boxes. Maybe she just sensed it. Either way, she knew, or knew enough. And when I came home Thursday night, everything came crashing down. She was waiting for me. Not angry, not shouting, but crying, already crying. The Tears started before I'd even opened my mouth, and they didn't stop. She asked why I was doing this, why I didn't talk to her, what she had done to deserve being abandoned. She said I was breaking her heart. She said I was choosing strangers over the woman who had sacrificed everything for me. The guilt poured in, faster than I could contain it. I tried to stay still, tried not to shrink, but my throat tightened, my stomach turned. She wasn't yelling, she was unraveling, and that was so much worse, because I had prepared myself to resist anger. I had planned for resistance, maybe even manipulation, but not this, not the heartbreak. She followed me into my room, sat on my bed, begged, said she would change, said she'd stop going into my room, said she'd give me more privacy, that she just needed more time, that we could work on things. I stood there, duffel bag in hand, and realized I couldn't do it. Not like that. I didn't leave. I sat down, I unpacked my bag, and I hated myself for it. That night, I barely slept. I stared at the ceiling, watching shadows crawl across it as the hours passed. I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel love. I felt crushed, like I'd been given a window and chosen to stay in the cage. She acted like nothing had happened. The next day, she made breakfast. She smiled. She asked if I had everything I needed for school. But the air between us had changed. Something unspeakable now hovered in every moment. She had one, but only for now. And maybe she knew that. I felt like I'd failed myself, like I had surrendered something I would never get back. Not just freedom, but resolve. I had chosen her pain over my own life. Again, but something else shifted. The anger didn't leave me this time. It stayed, quiet, low, simmering, a steady thrum beneath every conversation, every meal, every smile she gave me. I started locking everything, digitally at least. New passwords, two-factor authentication. I started writing my thoughts down in longhand and hiding the notebook in my backpack. I told fewer lies, but gave less truth. I answered her questions with silence. I began setting up my second attempt. This time, I wouldn't announce it. I wouldn't hesitate. I wouldn't wait for a day that felt right, because I had finally understood something vital. She wasn't going to let me go. I had to take my freedom. No permission, no negotiation, no dramatic. Goodbye. Just me, and a closed door behind me. After that failed attempt, something in me hardened, not in a dramatic, movie-style way. No big speeches, no middle finger to the sky kind of moment, just a gradual, silent turning inward. A decision not to give anything more than I had to, emotionally, mentally, or physically. I realized I couldn't win by confrontation. I couldn't outcry her tears or outlogic her guilt. I had tried honesty and boundaries and explanation. None of it worked. She didn't want understanding. She wanted control dressed as closeness, so I stopped fighting on her terms. I shifted into quiet resistance. It began with small things. I stopped answering her text right away. I muted notifications and replied hours later with short, neutral updates. I still told her where I was going, but never exactly when I'd be back. I started saying I'm not sure a lot. Not lying, not disobeying, just withholding. I locked my door when I was inside. It didn't technically lock, but I wedged a chair under the handle. It was enough to slow her down. And it worked. She stopped barging in as often. I think she sensed I needed space. Or maybe she was just waiting me out, hoping I'd soften again. But I didn't. I kept everything surface level. If she asked how school was, I said fine. If she cooked something, I said thanks. I didn't elaborate. I didn't engage. I gave her just enough to keep things from boiling over, but nothing real. The distance didn't make her kinder, just more confused. She'd sometimes hover outside my door, pretending to wipe something or check on the hallway lights. She tried to talk to me while I was working, ask questions she already knew the answers to. Her attempts weren't malicious, just desperate. And that's when I started to feel something even worse than anger, pity. I pitied her. This woman who had built her entire identity around being needed, now flailing as I quietly dismantled her role in my life. She didn't know who she was without being my guardian, my shadow. She had no hobbies, no real friends, no outside interest beyond our family unit. Her existence orbited mine, and that terrified me. But pity doesn't change the fact that I was still trapped. So I kept planning. I started working more hours remotely, quietly stacking money away. Not much, but enough to start over. I learned how to meal prep, how to make simple budgets, how to use public transport routes to avoid long commutes. I took notes from forums, Reddit threads, YouTube videos about minimalist living, cheap housing, flat shares, legal rights. I kept a list hidden, handwritten, coded with everything I need when the day came. I even packed a go bag, just one backpack, essentials only, documents, chargers, cash, toiletries, clean socks. I'd sit on my bed at night and look at it like a lifeboat in a storm I hadn't yet jumped into. Emotionally, I pulled back harder. I trained myself not to feel guilt when she cried over something small. I ignored the emotional blackmail, the quiet, bitter comments about how I never smile anymore, how people change, how all she wanted was for me to be happy. I stopped justifying my decisions. I stopped seeking her approval. I stopped needing her to understand, because she wouldn't, not really. I tried to be kind, but not compliant. I tried to be civil, but not close. I made a decision. I would leave without fanfare, without warning, without the dramatic collapse of everything. I wouldn't wait for her to allow it. I wouldn't open the door to another round of guilt and pleading and tears when the time came. I would simply go. My dad remained mostly silent through all of this. He existed in the house like a quiet ghost, present but disengaged. He saw the tension, he heard the arguments, but he never intervened. I think he was tired or afraid, or just used to the dynamic. He had long ago accepted his role as a background character in her script, and I didn't hate him for it, but I didn't trust him either, so I kept him out of the loop. The days blurred, life became a countdown I wasn't marking publicly. I attended classes, I worked, I came home, I nodded through conversations and ate food I didn't taste. I existed in a limbo, not quite free, but no longer asleep. Every small act of rebellion felt like a thread cutting through the web she built. One afternoon, she asked if I'd come with them on a weekend trip, a family retreat, she called it, something to bring us back together. She looked at me with soft, hopeful eyes. For a moment, I almost said yes, out of habit, out of guilt. But I didn't. I said I had too much work, that I couldn't. She smiled, tight, said it was fine. But I could feel the shift. She knew I was slipping away again. But this time, I wasn't going to stop. I had already signed the lease on the new place. My flatmates had helped carry a few things in advance. Most of what I owned could be replaced anyway, or didn't matter enough to bring. I had a date in mind. And this time, there would be no backing down. No emotional reset. No chair under the door to delay her entry into my life again. Just one morning, one bag, one quiet goodbye, written, not spoken. And then freedom. Not perfect, not easy, but finally, mine. In the end, leaving wasn't about strength. It wasn't about courage. It wasn't even about defiance. It was about clarity. That's what finally pushed me over the edge. Not a final confrontation or some dramatic act of rebellion, but a quiet understanding that this life, as it was, would never change unless I walked away from it. The realization came slowly, like fog lifting after months of overcast skies. It came not through crisis, but through accumulation of days I didn't live, of people I didn't meet, of things I didn't allow myself to want. I started watching others more, classmates, people in cafes, strangers on trains, watching the ease with which they occupied their lives, the way they moved through the world without asking permission, the small freedoms they took for granted, grabbing coffee at midnight, locking their doors, bringing someone home without justifying it. I wasn't angry anymore. I was grieving for the years I lost, for the younger version of me who waited so patiently to be allowed to grow, for the boy who confused being taken care of with being loved, for the man who had to unlearn everything just to feel like he had the right to breathe. And that grief, I found something else, resolve. Because what finally settled into my chest wasn't rebellion or vengeance, or a desire to prove anything. It was simply this: I am done shrinking to stay in someone else's comfort zone. She wasn't going to wake up one day and see me for who I am. She was never going to stop calling me my little boy, never going to stop making my choices about her fears, never going to hand over my life and say, it's yours now. That moment, that transfer of control, it was never coming. So I took it. I wrote a letter, to pages, nothing cruel, just the truth. I told her I was leaving, that I loved her, that I appreciated the things she did for me, but I could no longer live in a house where I wasn't allowed to grow, that I needed space to fail and try and fall and rebuild, that this wasn't punishment, it was survival. I told her I hoped we could talk again once the dust settled, once I was on my own feet. I left the letter on my bed. I packed one bag, the go bag I'd been quietly curating for weeks. Everything else would stay behind. The clothes, the shelves, the childhood junk I no longer needed, the trophies she kept cleaning even though I no longer cared, the photos, the reminders. I got up early, too early for anyone else to be awake. The air was still. My room looked the same, but I didn't feel connected to it anymore. It felt like a set piece, a museum exhibit that had closed for good. I walked out without a sound. No goodbyes, no final looks. I didn't look back when I closed the front door. I didn't hesitate when I stepped out into the morning light. It wasn't a grand, triumphant moment. There were no fireworks, no swelling soundtrack, just the cold weight of my backpack, the creak of the gate, and the silence of a world that didn't know what I had just done. But inside me, something was different. For the first time, I wasn't calculating someone else's feelings. I wasn't scanning for disapproval. I wasn't rehearsing justifications or apologies. I was just walking forward. It was terrifying, but it was also free. The city looked different that day. Bigger, rougher, more real. I noticed cracks in the pavement I'd never seen before. Heard sounds I usually drown out with music. Smelled the hot metal of bus doors as they opened. Everything felt sharper, because everything was finally mine to navigate. I arrived at the new place around 7:45. My flatmates weren't even awake yet. I let myself in with the spare key. My room was empty. A mattress, a desk, a small window, facing a brick wall. No decorations, no reminders. It was perfect. I set my bag down and sat on the edge of the bed, just breathing. No one knew where I was. No one was watching me. No one would knock on the door in 10 minutes to ask if I'd eaten or remind me to drink water, or tell me to go to sleep early. I was alone. It was beautiful. I spent the first few hours in total stillness. I didn't unpack. I didn't text anyone. I just sat in my own silence, letting it settle into my skin like sunlight. She didn't call. Not that day. Not the next. Maybe she was waiting for me to feel guilty. Maybe she thought I'd be back. Maybe she was too stunned to react. It didn't matter. I was gone, and the longer I stayed gone, the more I remembered who I was underneath all that fear. I started cooking simple meals. I started going for walks at midnight just because I could. I bought a plant for the windowsill. I hung up my own towels. I made coffee in silence and drank it without being asked what my plans were for the day. These were small things, things most people would never notice, but for me, they were revolutions. I was finally living my life. Not perfectly, not securely, not even particularly well, but fully. It's been just over 6 months since I left, long enough for everything to change. Not long enough for everything to make sense. I still live in that small room, the one with the window facing the brick wall. I have a few more things now. A lamp, a cheap rug I found at a thrift store, some secondhand books stacked under my nightstand, a coat hook that keeps falling off the door. It's not much, but it's mine. The room still smells a bit like the previous tenant. No matter how often I air it out, there's a soft buzzing in the walls when someone runs the dryer. The heating is unreliable. I've had to learn how to fix things myself, or at least Google them until they work again. It's not romantic. It's not Instagram worthy, but it's real, and I love it. I love it in the way you love something you earn with effort, something no one handed you, something you chose. The first few weeks after I left were the hardest. I kept waiting for something to crash, for the roof to cave in, for the loneliness to swallow me. But the crash never came. I felt alone, yes, but I also felt intact, quiet, unwatched. She didn't call, not for 3 weeks. Then one day, I got a message, just 3 words. Are you safe? That was it. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't respond right away. I wasn't ready. I didn't know how to shrink myself back into that old dynamic, even for one conversation. I waited another week before I answered. I kept it short, kind, but distant. Yes, I'm okay. I hope you are too. She didn't reply. But the door cracked open a little that day, not for her to come in, but for me to set the terms of whatever came next. We've spoken a few times since. Short, polite calls, nothing heavy, mostly updates, weather, health, vague mentions of work. She hasn't asked me to come home. She hasn't visited. She still tries to send me care packages, snacks, socks, vitamins. I don't always accept them. Our relationship now is a strange kind of shadow, something half recognizable, half foreign. I don't trust it completely, not yet, but I don't hate it. I know she's hurt. I know she thinks I abandoned her. I also know she's wrong. I didn't leave to punish her. I left because staying would have meant losing myself entirely. And I think, on some level, she's beginning to understand that, or at least accept it. My dad sent me an email recently, just a few lines, no subject. He said he was proud of me, that he should have done more, that he hopes I'm well. I didn't cry when I read it, but I felt something settle inside me. Not closure, exactly, but recognition. It was the first time in years I felt seen by him. I'm not flourishing yet. My income is unstable. I ration groceries sometimes. I've burned rice more times than I can count. I've had days where I wake up and wonder if I made a huge mistake, but I've also had moments, real, clear moments, where I've looked around at my tiny space and smiled, not because it's easy, but because it's mine. No one moves my things. No one checks my phone. No one knocks on the door unless they're invited. I go to bed when I want. I eat when I'm hungry. I'm learning what it means to listen to myself, not someone else's fear. I've started going out more. Just little things, coffee with friends, walks with classmates, sitting in the park with a book and no plans. I've even gone on a few dates. Nothing serious yet, but this time, there's no cafe ambush. No silent shame hanging over the conversation, just people figuring it out. Sometimes I think about who I might have been if I'd left earlier, if I'd pushed back harder, if I'd grown up in a home where freedom wasn't something to fight for. But I don't stay in that thought for long. It's a trap. I am who I am because of what I had to climb out of. And while I wouldn't wish that climb on anyone, I can say now, I made it. I'm not anyone's little boy anymore. I'm just a person, living a quiet life in a tiny apartment, figuring things out one burned dinner and overdue bill at a time. And honestly, that's enough for now.